Joining us on the phone right now is John Forte. John, good morning.
Good morning. It's actually afternoon where I am. Hi, all. It's a pleasure to be here.
John, a musician, and also now adding to his resume, movie star as well.
That's kind. I don't know if you can be a movie star in a documentary, but if they asked me to do the feature film, I consider starring as myself.
Yes, well, you did a fine job, and the film we're talking about is The Russian Winter, which is a documentary that really highlights a trip you made to Russia and playing music, partnering with some Russian musicians. But really what the most interesting part of the story, and there are many of them, but your history and what got you to that point. And I'll let Pam talk a little bit about the background of the film, and certainly John chime in as well, and she'll ask you some questions about that also.
All right, John, there are probably quite a few of us that don't know a lot about you and your background. You've had quite a roller coaster ride of life so far. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about what obstacles you've overcome and to the point where you are right now?
In terms of obstacles, I think the first one was being raised in Brownsville, Brooklyn, which is where I'm from. From a very, very young age, I had a predilection for music, and I started off as a classically trained violinist. I did well academically. That afforded me the opportunity to go to a boarding school, Phillips Exeter Academy in New Hampshire. And after that, I returned to New York, and I met Lauryn Hill. And it was through Lauryn that I met her other bandmates in the then-known group called the Fugees. So on their sophomore album, they asked for me to come in and to produce, producing and writing and performing on that, and it made history. After that, I was basically being groomed for my solo career. So when my solo album was released in 1998, it was called Poli-Sci. It came out to what I like to refer to as critical acclaim but commercial disappointment. We only sold about 100,000 copies. By today's standards, that would actually be really respectable. But back then, it was considered a failure. I engaged in opprobrium, and I blamed everyone except for myself. I mean, everyone from the top down. And when I was released from my record contract...
John, how old were you at that time?
At that time, I was about 19 or 20. Yeah, I was also nominated for a Grammy that year.
So you were still a young man.
You were a kid.
Yeah, I was, although I felt like I knew it all, and I guess that's what kids do.
Right.
You know, in any era. And I left that company and decided to pursue my career without a record company. The problem, of course, was that, being young and being exposed to fame, and I had too much fame, and I had no money because I spent it, and I had no real monetary wherewithal in order to produce this sophomore. So the universe has a funny way of giving you what you want when you think you want it. And at the time, I met an individual who offered me an opportunity to basically involve myself in a criminal enterprise where I was the middleman between the couriers and himself. And I justified that by saying, "Oh, look, I'm not a drug dealer, and I never have been. I never put that message out in my music. And if the house of cards should fall, I'll just say, hey, I knew that something was going on, but I didn't know exactly what was going on. I was out of the loop." And when that house of cards fell in 2000, I was arrested at Newark Airport, picking up 2 couriers. In fact, unbeknownst to me at the time, it was actually a controlled delivery. The couriers had already been caught by feds and by the authorities. They were working with the authorities, and I was the person that ended up being wrapped up in it and being named, because obviously the couriers didn't know the top guy, and they knew me. So I ended up going to trial in 2001 in Texas, which is where the conspiracy began, because that's where the couriers were caught. The first thing that the judge said to the jury was, willful blindness is not an acceptable defense. And I turned to my lawyer and I said, what is willful blindness? He said, well, that was our defense.
Oh, God.
And yeah, so that was really, really shocking. And I was ultimately convicted in 2001. I was charged with 2 charges. One was a conspiracy charge to involve myself in a criminal enterprise, which I was acquitted of, and the other one was possession of a controlled substance with the intent to distribute. In this case, it was 14 kilograms of liquid cocaine. And
we're talking to John Forte. John, a musician who had done work with the Fugees back in the late 90s. He was just telling how he kind of got derailed and through this drug charge ended up in jail. Really fell victim, I'll use that term, to the mandatory minimum drug laws. And because it was a nonviolent first offense, yet you were sentenced to 14 years in prison.
Exactly. I was sentenced to 14 years in federal prison, first offense. We lost all of our appeals while I was away. there before the grace of God go I, because in 2008, after serving more than 7 years in prison, my sentence was commuted by then President George W. Bush.
Yeah, and
I came home very early.
Pam and I were talking off the air, and I found something very interesting that you talked about in the film. Your sentence was commuted by George W. Bush, who folks wouldn't think of as a liberal guy, who probably didn't know who the Fugees were. But really, it was the work, I think, of Carly Simon that really made that happen. Isn't that right, John?
Absolutely. Carly Simon is my mentor, my spiritual godmother, and my dear friend. She advocated for me every single day while I was away, making phone calls, writing letters. And, you know, a lot of people, it's easy to sort of identify Carly, and I don't want to mitigate the work that she did, but in what she did, she, along with the help of friends and family, you know, I had so much support on the outside, and there were so many people who attempted to help me while I was away, who encouraged me to return to school. And, you know, while I was in prison, I ended up returning to school and pursuing my undergraduate degree at the London School of Economics, which is a great institution, and they offer what they call their world campus, because I got really wrapped up in the world. I cared about politics, I cared about the world, and it was pretty ironic because I cared more about the world when I was from it than when I was in it.
Sandy,
yes.
Here, where did you serve?
Hi, Sandy.
Where did you serve your sentence? At what prison?
It was federal prison, and I began that term in Houston, Texas, at the Federal Detention Center. Then I made my way up to Loretto, which was in western Pennsylvania, and ultimately I did the bulk of my time at Forte Federal Correctional Institution in southern New Jersey.
Oh, but John, I want to get to the film, and you say something kind of early on in the film that I found very interesting, particularly in contrast to who commuted your sentence. But you tell a story in the film about meeting somebody from Joe Biden's office, Vice President Joe Biden, and how that individual thanked you for the work you were doing and the important work you were doing for your country. And you found that kind of ironic statement based on what had happened to you earlier.
I did. You know, the crux of the film was to cover our 2.5-month tour, 2.5-month 5-city tour throughout Russia, where we went to Moscow, St. Petersburg, Nizhny Novgorod, Yekaterinburg, and Kazan. And it wasn't about just doing my music. It was about collaborating with artists on the ground in Russia night. And I didn't just want to do my music. I wanted to collaborate with other artists, because I believe that good music is good music is good music, irrespective of the language or the genre, and that's what we set out to do. We were also privileged enough to be able to donate all of the proceeds from our live performances to local Russian orphanages, charities, and children's hospitals that we also visited. And it was during that time that we had a performance at the Spaso House, which is the residence of the U.S. ambassador in Moscow. When afterwards, like you said, I was approached by one of Vice President Biden's attachés, thanking me for doing this important work for my country. And I'll be honest, I didn't see myself as doing necessarily important work for my country. I saw myself as on an artistic endeavor to collaborate with other artists rather than doing this act of diplomacy. So I was taken aback by that, but I was obviously had mixed emotions about it, because on the one hand, I was completely grateful for being recognized for work that I was doing, but on the other, it was definitely not lost on me because of the fact that 9.5 years prior to that, I saw this paper that said the United States of America versus John Forte, and I realized at the point that I'd come full circle.
The movie's really about second chances, and by the way, I absolutely loved the movie. I actually saw you performing at the ASCAP Music Cafe at Sundance, fell in love with your voice, and your performance with Ben Taylor and Natasha Bedingfield was absolutely wonderful. So I looked up a lot of information about you. Was so excited to see that your film was opening at Tribeca. As I said, the movie is about second chances. What do you hope to do with your second chance? Because not everybody gets a second chance in life.
Not everyone does, and not a day has gone by that I don't remember the people, and I met some great people who was away who were not as fortunate as I was to receive that second chance. And yes, I'm out here now, and I'm returning to music, but I'm also remembering them and trying not to take any of these opportunities for granted, and also trying to help out whenever I can, and whether that's aligning myself with certain philanthropic endeavors or speaking to criminal justice reform, or especially the necessities of executive clemency. You know, I like the person that I've become because, you know, through that adversity, I was able to ask myself the difficult questions about who was important to me, what was important to me, and I think that I'm trying to have that reflect in my art, not just my music, but the films that we release. And every time I get an opportunity to have a platform, because those who have the platform speak for many who don't, and I really try to do my best to honor that spirit and that ethos, and to not take the second chance for granted.
John, tell us a little about the music that you're creating now, and I believe we have your new song we're going to play after this interview, but talk a little bit about the music that you're making now.
The music that I'm making now, I like to think of it as an alternative to what's probably the popular stuff that is I hate to say that's infiltrating the ears of the youth, but you know what? There's a lot of music out there that's putting across a pretty much destructive message. And while everyone has the right to do what he or she wants to do because of you know the fortune of living in a country where you have those First Amendment rights, I think that I'm at a point in my life where I want to make beautiful art that inspires people to effectuate change. So yes, it's about the music, and I love the fact that I get to collaborate with great artists. Like I said, I'm in Kiev right now, and we had a show last night with Sensei, who's also featured in the. I really just want to make something beautiful, and that's not to say I want to project an image of seeing life through rose-colored glasses. I think that we can make art that is honest and pure and talks about the goods of society as well as the evils of society. But I really just want to do that in a responsible way and offer an alternative to what might be deemed destructive, because I really do believe in the babies, and I hope that first and foremost I make this music for myself, but I hope to inspire young people to be better to themselves and to be better to their friends and to their families and to their world, because you know this baton will be passed.
Absolutely.
And I want the young people in particular to know that I'm willing to pass it, and I believe in them, and I want to prop them up as opposed to breaking them down.
Your career seems to be marked with some great collaborations, and on the song that we have to play in a little bit here, Your Traveling Lights, it's another collaboration with the band Firehorse.
Came from a very, very serendipitous moment. I was speaking at the Oslo Freedom Forum about a month and a half ago, in fact, and I was one of the musical performers / speakers there, and I had the privilege of seeing Firehorse perform, and I was rocked to my core. We struck up a conversation, and we had a jam session afterwards, and I said to her, I said, I would love for us to get together. Well, she lives in New York, and I live in New York, and contacted her, and I said, hey, would you be interested in participating on my new release, which is called The Light Suite? And she came over, and we recorded that song on a Friday evening, and we shot the video for it on a Saturday, and we released it a couple of days later. I'm in love with that song. Yeah, I know that I'm biased, but I am in love with that song.
Well, I think we're all in agreement here too.
A great song and a great video. I get a chance to see it. And John, you know, it's on me. It isn't lost on me the fact that all these collaborations, many of these collaborations, involve beautiful women.
Oh, that doesn't hurt.
Yeah,
that doesn't hurt at all. But you know what? Fortunately, Sensei is not a beautiful woman.
Right.
And that is one of my favorite songs, Wind Song, I believe.
Wind Song.
Yep.
Wind Song. But he is a beautiful man inside and out. So you know what? I do like to collaborate with beautiful people, but beauty is beneath the surface. And I've met some great people in my travels.
Absolutely. John Forte, we really appreciate you joining us today. And the film, again, is The Russian Winter, and I'd encourage everybody to try to find it. And
I have one more question for you before we let you go, though, John. Is there any possibility that the American Express Tribeca Film Festival on the road will be featuring you in Chicago?
I don't know. We are in close contact with the film festival. Like I said, I'm headed to Moscow tonight. We have our international premiere at the Moscow International Film Festival, so it'd be nice to bring that movie back to Russia and to get the Russian response to it. But it's in our best interest, we think, to get as many eyes on the film and as many ears on the music as possible. So I would love for as many people to see it. And if that means that we'll come to Chicago, I'll be there on the next thing smoking. But I hope that we can, and if not, it'll maybe come to a big screen or a little screen near you soon enough. But I encourage people to seek it out, look at the trailer online, learn about the other artists who are featured in the film, including Alina Orlova from Lithuania. Sensei from the Ukraine, Billy's Band from St. Petersburg, Animal Jazz from St. Petersburg. We've got so many incredible, talented folks in the film, and it was an honor and a pleasure for me to collaborate with them on that journey.
Well, John Forte, we appreciate you sharing your story with us, and we're going to play your song in a little bit, and I think you're going to develop some more fans here in Kankakee, Illinois.
I hope so, and if any of your fans